Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from October 2nd to the 8th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. Try to think of it as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the US cannabis industry, identify top US MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now, and take advantage whenever you feel ready, because at some point wealth is going to be created and you might as well learn how to take advantage if you wish to do so you can help yourself, your family, and your local community down the line. But with that, we're going to focus on what we can control, looking at state sales data that shows that this is a state-led growth story and that sales continue to pick up in new markets as cannabis sales pick up in August, which we love to see because looking in past years, typically August sales do not surpass the summer high that is July. And hey, it's also nice to see more positive titles coming out of new cannabis ventures for once. I don't know why Alan Brochstein has gotten so bitter towards cannabis companies, especially when his niche is cannabis, but the downside is that he's gotten a little bit lazy and doesn't provide those nice visuals on this page anymore, so I'll just break it down for you. Eastern markets, you can pause to read the details, but main thing I think is worth pointing out, obviously Maryland, a new market that launched for adult use in July, I believe, so this is its second month in August. Month-over-month growth already 156.5%. Year-over-year growth, 121.6. So that is amazing, let alone Michigan being so competitive, handing out as many licenses and providing as much equal access to opportunity, still seeing 32.9% annual growth year-over-year. And so if we look at the medical markets as well, Florida and Pennsylvania, I think it's super impressive that they're still seeing sequential growth month over month, let alone this much annual growth, highlighting how important their market size is for continued medical growth and what we're going to see when that flip switches. And it's worth noting that next month, Ohio is going to vote on adult use, and we're going to find out then. I don't know exactly when Ohio would plan to launch after, the results of that, but worth noting that Ohio's next month, and then we will find out on November 8th whether Florida is going to be on the ballot in 2024, and PA is sort of the last wild card out there. But with that, Western markets, of course, these are the more mature markets in the country. Still, the fact that Nevada is seeing 10.4% annual growth, I think that's hella impressive. Obviously, I think the one thing that all these states needs is more legal dispensary outlets to offset the black market. But the main thing is we're, relying on the growth coming out of these new markets. As I mentioned, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida eventually, but then at the same time, New Jersey and New York once they get their act together and really ramp up. So much potential here, folks. So I wanted to share that. Of course, full link in the comments, but that's essentially it. And so from Cannabis Business Times, Maryland's cannabis retailers post 90.5 million in September sales. The nation's newest legalized market came just shy of August figures as medical sales decline faster than adult use sales grow, as that typically always happens. But impressive that they did 90.5 million in September, coming just shy of the 91.7 million they did in August. And so don't want to spend too much time because this video is going to be very long, but I invite you to pause to read if you're interested, while I will bring you down a little bit further if you wanted to read the rest of the article. Again, full link in the comments. But with that, a breakdown visually from connoisseurs.io, so thank you for sharing this. Maryland cannabis dispensary sales, just another way of looking at that data. As interestingly enough, adult use sales in September actually beat August adult use sales, but August medical sales beat September medical sales by 2 million. And so that's how went from 91 million to 90 combined from August to September. And we have a breakdown, combined sales by product category for September. Of course, flower remains king for most. We love to see that, because I do think that is going to be the case going forward. And with that, from Marijuana Moment, essentially the same story from a different source, just if you wanted to read it for a different perspective. I'm sure Maryland is very happy, though, that they've ended cannabis prohibition. You can pause to read, otherwise grab the full link in the comments. But with that, on to Illinois, as they've updated their sales figures for September, updated as of October 2nd. And one thing I'm just happy to relay is that typically July is the summer peak for sales, and we see a record amount sold every year in July. Last year, it was 135 million. This year, it hit 140 million. But if we look at last year, we saw August trail back down to 129, 130, and it stays relatively low until December, where we hit a new peak. Well, I'm happy to report that August only fell by about 1 million, and then September remained just 1 million short of July. And I think this is helped by new dispensaries that have recently opened up, some of the social equity ones, which, thank the Lord, they're finally getting their chance in Illinois. But what's more important to highlight is that I believe, again, August actually set a record after July for the most number of items sold in a month, and then September actually beat that. with more items sold than August, as in-state resident sales saw a record 105 million as well, and out-of-state resident sales did 34.4 million. And so I think that's very impressive. Did you think anything else, or did anything catch your eye with these figures? Let me know in the comments, but very happy to report that Illinois' sales are likely going to be helped by some new dispensaries coming online. And just to add to that for marijuana moment, as Illinois officials highlight unprecedented growth of legal cannabis market as cannabis revenue outpaces alcohol. I mean, we knew this was going to come, but worth noting also that with the opening of 28 new retailers, and so we knew that there was 185 active dispensaries in Illinois for however many years waiting on new social equity licenses. It seems 28 so far have been added to that 185. I could be wrong, but please let me know in the comments if you know more. But all that to say, you can pause to read those details. All told, legal cannabis industry brought in about $451 million for the state in fiscal year 2023, which ran from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. And in past years, Illinois made significantly more revenue from cannabis than from alcohol, which brought in about $316.3 million during the same period. And so very interesting data here. I invite you to pause to read. Otherwise, there are more graphics that you can check out in the article. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on it, making this too long, but you can grab the link in the comments to go through that. So love to see that out of Illinois. While I did some digging and I could not find the updated Missouri sales numbers for September yet, if I can find them by tomorrow, I will post them in the comments. But for anyone interested, I figured I would share this. Thank you, Cy Scott, sharing headset data showing the top 5 cannabis brands in Missouri for September 2023. Well, I do apologize that I did not make the time to go through each of these brands and find out the parent company for them. Just figured I would share this for anyone interested, and that's tracking Missouri. And so with that, from Florida, the Office of Medical Cannabis Use for this past week, we look at new dispensaries approved from October 2nd to the 6th. And we see Sanctuary Cannabis opened a new dispensary in Hollandale Beach. If we look up to the qualified patient count for this past week, we can see that they have actually reached another milestone, surpassing 850,000 medical patients in Florida, which I think is pretty awesome. And all that to say, it represents a week-over-week increase of 2,533 as well, which means we're seeing more and more patients also turn to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. And it's just better to see over 2,000 patients week over week recruited than less than 1,000, as we were seeing in some points. You know, peak summer when it's really, really hot and less people want to leave their house to go to the doctor. But still, good to see growth there as another milestone has been hit. And we can see all the MSOs that operate in Florida, the number of active dispensaries they have in operation. And then for this past week, from September 29th to the 5th, the number of milligrams of THC sold just this past week, the number of milligrams of CBD sold, and the number in ounces of smokable flower sold. And so I do not have the updated Florida market share comp sheet visuals from connoisseurs.io yet, but once we get those, I will put those in the comments, or likely by tomorrow, so that you can take a look at that as another way of taking in this information. But with that, the other big Florida update, get the fuck out of here, Turdo. The other big Florida update, though, is that the Supreme Court schedules hearing to decide if cannabis legalization initiative will make the 2024 ballot. And so a big deal, folks. We're looking at November 8th. Key arguments and responses from both parties have been submitted through briefs. The court announced on Tuesday that it is scheduling a hearing on the dispute for November 8th. And this is going to be a big telling day in the sense of how just Florida Supreme Court is, or how corrupt it might be. Because if the Attorney General really thinks that she knows better than the majority of Floridians that want legal cannabis, that highlights that democracy no longer is a thing in Florida. And so it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But I think if any common sense prevails and if there is any justice, obviously they're going to rule in favor of Floridians and the majority that want legal cannabis. And that would mean that would mean the ballot initiative for 2024 would remain intact and a go. So again, we don't know. Lots riding on November 8th, but just wanted to update you there. And so with that, from New Mexico, as adult use cannabis sales cross $500 million mark, his latest monthly sales narrowly misses record again. And so love to see another state loving the fact that they've ended cannabis prohibition. And as I shared in my last week's video, they have over 1,000 dispensaries in New Mexico providing equal access to opportunity. And look what you get, continued growth month over month. As New Mexico's legal market retailers sold more than 47 million of combined last month. While that marks a slight decline from 48 million records set in August, the state has now reached the benchmark of $500 million of rec products being purchased since sales launched in April of last year. And so congrats, New Mexico. Love to see that. Since then, sales of adult use has been generally increasing while medical cannabis sales have been trending downward. And what helps this growth? Opening more legal outlets, right? Eliminating that bottleneck that we've seen so badly affect New Jersey and New York. And again, I mean, I think that is fully on purpose, by design, and just straight up incompetence. And that is why New Mexico, Missouri, Maryland are not having the same problems that specifically New York, really, less New Jersey, but more New York. All that to say, you can pause to read for more on New Mexico if you're interested. But with that, found this study from Cancer Research Communications as of September 22nd, 2023. It's cannabis and cannabinoid use prevalence and symptom management among patients with cancer. And we love more and more studies like this, pointing out the ridiculousness of cannabis being put in the Schedule 1 in the first place, hence why we're trying to correct that very costly 50-year mistake. And so the data doesn't lie. Symptoms such as pain, nausea, and anxiety are common in individuals with cancer. Treatment of these issues is often challenging. And so you can see how many people have participated and how many use cannabis, but the main thing is that patients that used it reported moderate to high relief of symptoms with cannabis use. And whether cannabis is illegal or legal, we know that if it improves your quality of life, especially in some of your darkest days when you're fighting cancer, people are going to turn to it. And so whether that means it relieves the suffering enough for you to have hope and get through the day, and whether that hope allows you to build a better mindset and better habits that helps you eventually beat that cancer, cannabis seems to do this better than anything else. And so love to share that full study in the comments, of course, if you wanted to go through that. But with that, another one for marijuana moment, as cannabis entourage effect with multiple cannabinoids produces a stronger and longer lasting high than pure THC, study finds. So this is that age-old debate whether high THC or the grouping of compounds creates the best possible high. Who knows? For anyone that's interested, you can grab the link in the comment. But with that, on to some of the rest of the stories from X. Weed Street 420 shares that it was 1 year ago yesterday, October 6, 2022, the statement from President Biden on cannabis reform. We were expecting some big things. Why? Right? How silly for us to think that the Biden admin could do anything other than outright lie. And so thank you, Last Prisoner Project, for at least calling them out on their bullshit, as exactly 1 year and 1 day ago, POTUS announced a mass federal cannabis pardon while urging governors to do the same and requesting a cannabis scheduling review. 1 year later, not a single federal cannabis prisoner has been released as a result of this proclamation. And the silence is really, really deafening. And so with that, an unexpected one from CNN Business, as a landmark cannabis bill is headed to the Senate floor. And this was reported October 2nd after the successful markup last week that happened on September 27th. But does this article, tell us when this bill is headed to the floor? No, another very misleading title. We know that this will happen at some point, and the next big step, at least for SAFER, is to get it out of the Senate before we deal with the House and all the shenanigans that happen there. But sadly, the article doesn't actually answer the misleading headline that it leads us with. It's really just an interview with Jeff Merkley. So if you're interested, grab the full link in the comments, but won't spend too much time on it. Well, this is an article from Forbes basically touching on what I shared last week for Marijuana Moment, as I believe Marijuana Moment was the first with the scoop, adding new amendments to the SAFER banking bill revealed. And so, like I mentioned, there's essentially the same story that I shared in my last week's video. Not going to spend too much time on it, but if you're interested and want to read for whatever reason, grab the link in the comments to go through that from Forbes. And then, so just a reminder, everyone, from Toby Cannabis, potential catalyst for cannabis, the most important outright rescheduling to Schedule 3. This is what matters the most, and I think this is what caused that big spike August 30th, and we've had to consolidate since then because there's been no real news on this big matter. And of course, while we'd love to see straight up hockey growth that's not sustainable, we'd rather see, the big jump up and then the healthy consolidation needed for us to gap up next, pending some sort of fucking news, obviously. But second most important catalyst, new states, Florida, Ohio, PA, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, going through some of those sales. While third, least important, well, not least important, but SAFER is obviously important for all the social equity applicants and minorities that were lied to by the Dems, obviously. And then the AG memo. This is another sort of unexpected, but also expected, whether that might come in the HOPE Act as a Garland Memo 2.0. There's been talk of that in my last week's video. Number 4 would be uplisting, and then number 5 is ultimately the fundamentals, growth and cash flow that is going to come as more states reform their laws, and hopefully Congress does their job and helps the industry a little bit by taking the handcuffs off them, removing 280E. And essentially why we're all here, being David's trying to fight against Goliath. Because get this, another prime example of how fucking backwards the US's agencies have become. Breaking news, the DEA has temporarily extended teleprescribing for controlled substances through 2024. Fair enough, I'm sure this will mean that many people get their medicine easily through the phone and don't have to spend resources or time. But at the same time, when last year, the year before this, reported 100,000 opioid overdoses, do you not think that this could be contributing to the problem? And the fact that you can act quickly on this, or scheduling other random substances that people have manufactured. And you can't fucking quickly act on rescheduling cannabis to Schedule 3. No one has faith or trust in anything you can do. And it's just beyond me. These fucking agencies, man, they got to be abolished at this point. And so with that, from Cannabis Business Times, which U.S. senators have signed their names to the Safer Banking Act of 2023? Since the revised cannabis banking bill was introduced in late September, 31 lawmakers have decided to co-sponsor the legislation. Here's the fluid list. And so for anyone interested, figured I would share this, updated as of October 5th, so you can pause to read if you're interested, and then I'll just bring you through the whole article. Full link in the comments if you want to go through that. But lead sponsors, original co-sponsors, additional co-sponsors that have come in since. And that seems to be it if you're interested. And so with that, the other big news of this week that I really don't know if it even matters that much. It's noise. It's the political theater that's trying to distract everyone from the reality on the ground, the state-led growth story, and all these other factors and catalysts that have been building. And so I wanted to share some of these comments because, I think it's relevant. I agree with Potjock. At the same time, we're always going to get this bullshit when it comes to cannabis, right? It's just a reminder that it's out of our control, and the more we try to think we can control it, the more counterproductive it is ultimately. So anyways, following the successful markup vote, prospects for bicameral safer banking legislation appeared positive in both legislative branches. But then, of course, we need a shakeup. Things took an unforeseen twist as Kevin McCarthy, a known SAFE supporter, was ousted as House Majority Speaker. And so while we know, we need to get SAFE out of the Senate, and that should be easy based on all the recent momentum, news, and events, now is the House going to be the hard part? Oh my God, right? And so just wanted to share this clip from Matt Gaetz, again, who happens to be the warrior for the American people out of Congress, if we can name anyone based on what they've been doing recently. And so just wanted to share this clip from him, highlighting how we all essentially feel. And so I just want to say again, when I was a shit lib, I would have believed anything the media told me about Matt Gaetz, but all I can see from reporting on cannabis and seeing what this man has done, being a vocal advocate for the plant and common sense and for the American people, as opposed to, like he mentions here, the Uniparty, the PACs, and the lobbyists. I got to give this man credit. I'm a big fan because he has the balls to say what we're all thinking. And so,
I mean, the Speaker did not just fail to remediate the breach of the agreement that he made with us in January, he accelerated the instances of breach. Like, after I laid out the breach, he went and violated the 72-hour rule. After I laid out the breach, he violated the $100 million no amendment suspension rule. So he seems to be reverting to the very unfortunate muscle memory of Washington, D.C. that has put our nation atop a $33 trillion debt, that has led to $2 trillion annual deficits in our near future, and the rapid global de-dollarization of the economy. When you look at the BRICS system, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they're moving away from the dollar. And just in August, they added 6 new countries, including G20 economies in the Western Hemisphere and Gulf monarchies. Moreover, you saw U.S. News say that the #1 economic trend of 2023 is de-dollarization globally. This worries me. You all get all worked up that there's going to be some uncomfortable, chaotic moment that I'll feel pressure from conservatives or Democrats or whomever. I feel the judgment of history. I feel the weight of that. I worry that when the history books are written about this country going down, that my name is going to be on the board of directors.
I bet you do too.
Going down, and if we're losing the dollar, I'm going down fighting. And I don't care if that means fighting Republicans, Democrats, the Uniparty, the leadership, the PACs, the lobbyists. I've had it. I've been here 7 years. We don't have a fucking budget. We haven't had one since the mid-90s. I'm through with it. I apologize for using that word, but the only path forward here is to have single subject spending bills that can be reviewed, amended, considered, and I think that is the responsible way that our legislatures all over this country operate for good reason.
I just appreciate the authenticity, and of course you can call it counterproductive that Matt Gaetz essentially created this, that caused this shakeup. But when I zoom out, I do not believe this is going to change things in the big picture, mainly because the scheduling announcement is the holy grail, of course, and while SAFER should have passed years ago, sadly we're seeing that SAFER is the political tool used to essentially see what senators are going to do at the expense of the American people that, were sold that bag of goods 2.5 years ago, sadly. And so with that from Don Murphy, an historic understatement. Where do we go from here? Who's on deck to be the next House Speaker, or does it matter to safe banking? Again, just sharing it because I appreciate Don's work and all the awareness that he shares for us.
Hello, Twitter friends. Don Murphy from the steps of the Capitol on the House side. To say yesterday was a historic day would be a huge understatement. But what everybody really wants to know is, how does it affect safe banking? Let's be clear. We are not going to affect this one way or the other, right? But we also have to get safe banking through the Senate first. The shakeup will resolve itself before that happens. So this really won't delay anything. But the question is, who will replace Kevin McCarthy? Who, by all accounts, was pretty good on safe banking anyway. He voted for it twice. So we're not going to do better, likely, than Kevin McCarthy. We could end up with Tom Emmer, who actually not only voted for SAFE, but also co-sponsored it. We could end up with Matt Gaetz. We could end up with a number of people who were pretty good. We'll see. And as the week progresses, as we see names, I will list them out for you and let you know who is where on safe banking, who has been where. But it's going to be an interesting ride, as if it wasn't enough of a roller coaster. So strap in, and we'll go along for this ride together. Take care.
Based on what I've seen, I wouldn't be opposed to Matt Gaetz becoming the new House Speaker, but I don't know how likely the chances of that actually are. And so just scrolling down to share with you some of the comments so that you don't have to grab the link to look if you're interested. But with that also, Don did share, highlighting again, first of all, we got to get safe banking out of the Senate first, which it likely will happen in time on their watch, not ours, sadly. But I'm not going to go through the whole article because it's strictly just speculation. But what a new House Speaker will mean for cannabis reform, including banking. Reps Jim Jordan and Steve Scalise have opposed virtually every cannabis measure that's gone before them since they entered federal office. Well, what if they get the chance? What are the odds going to be then? Hey, we all have no idea. And so anyways, just scrolling down if you're interested in some of the comments. But with that, from Dennis Rudev, thank you for sharing, Dennis, what Echelon has to say about the weekly updates. So I'll share this for you folks. Cannabis market highlights. I invite you to pause to read. This is page 1. Page 2, U.S. developments. Florida Supreme Court scheduling November 8th for that decision. Illinois crushing it. DEA reports significant decline in testing of seized cannabis. Advocates point to embraced legalization as cause. No shit. Obviously, when you no longer make it illegal for something, the demand and the black market demand goes down. New York State opens license application window. I didn't even end up sharing this story because it's so embarrassing that New York still thinks it's impressive to hand out licenses when you can't turn those licenses into real shops. Well, I got a bit more on Verano, part 1, 2, and 3. Vexed Science seems to be some of their picks. And so again, this is what Echelon has to say. Cresco Labs, Planet 13, Trulieve, High Tide from Canadian Developments. And again, take these with a grain of salt because some of these investment firms are wrong. And then with that, from VIII Capital, thanks Todd Harrison for sharing this. The next shoe to drop, we are increasingly confident that cannabis will be moved to Schedule 3 with the DEA's decision potentially arriving in weeks. Where did they get that from? I don't know. By the end of October, an enactment by mid-2024. That would be ideal. And so we are waiting on this, of course. I'll leave it here if you wanted to pause to read, but I think there's a little bit more I can scroll down to share. Yes, these visuals might as well if you wanted to take a look. I'm not going to try and spend too much time breaking them down, though, as I'm sort of just looking at them now. I wanted to only feature what was at the top, but figured I would share this because it's also along and included. But hey, the reality is that when MSOs were valued at this point, market cap-wise, they were making half the revenue they're doing now. And now they're worth fucking pennies compared to that. And they're, they've got double the stores, double the revenues. Some of them are free cash flow. They're heading closer to free cash flow. So if you like them at this price, you should love them at this price, especially before August 30th announcement, or that announcement that we got, right? Even lower than pandemic lows. And so all that to say, I figure I will share with you folks because this past week I did buy some more Air Wellness. And fortunately I do have a job now. So the longer this all takes, again, I just see it as me getting the opportunity to build a larger position, and so I cannot complain. Plan accordingly for your own situation, folks. This is not advice, but just to give you some context and transparency, my average price to start the week was $3.50, and I wanted to get that lower if possible. Now, obviously, had I waited with all my cash until Friday yesterday, I could have gotten some shares at like $2.40 or $2.35 Canadian at the lowest. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. It would have been great, but I'm proud that I still got shares below my average price of $3.50. And so on the 3rd, I bought shares at $3.15, and then on the 6th, I bought shares at $2.60, and I'm very happy that that triggered. Obviously, could have waited and got lower. All that to point out is that my share price is now from $3.50. My average price has fallen from $3.50 down to $3.37, and I now have a total of 2,025 shares. And I am happy about that, though. Obviously, it could be lower, but I know that I now effectively own shares of Air Wellness at a market cap of less than $250 million. And based on where they've been in the past and how many more stores they've opened and how they've expanded and the growth that they're going to see in the future, especially when Florida goes for adult use, I am very happy owning them at a market cap of just 250. So just wanted to share that context, folks. But this is definitely a good chart to read through and look at many times if you haven't before, because this is very telling, and should be some foreshadowing. And so with that, folks, from Barron's, this is an article that unfortunately, since I've got so many stories, they just keep timing out, and I've unfortunately lost access to the free subscriptions based on how many times I've had to refresh it. So thing is, you probably won't. So if you wanted to read this recent Barron's article, Aiming High, Where to Find Profits Among Weed Stocks, grab the link in the comments and you should be able to read it since you probably haven't clicked on it many, many times. And so with that, from Jesse Redmond, thank you, Jesse, for sharing this interesting data point. Since the HHS news on August 30th, the Tier 2 basket continues to be the top performer. It's up 74% on average versus 54% for Tier 1s and 37% for Tier 3s. I love that, and I love that Air Wellness is one of those that benefits from this. And a little bit more down here if you're interested. Pause to read that bit. Pause to read this bit. Pause to read this bit if you're interested. So thank you, Jesse Redmond, for sharing those. Well, on to some MSO news. Green Thumb Industries to hold third quarter 2023 earnings call on November 8th, 2023, after the market closes. And so this will come 5 p.m. afterwards, November 8th. Love to see that, though, as MSOs are ready for Q3, and I look forward to that. But apparently some sad news for Ben. Just a reminder, always, it's hard to know when you get married, but very important decision is who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Try to make sure it's the right person before you tie that knot. As the deep dive shares, apparently CEO Ben Kovler of Green Thumb Industries loses $52.5 million worth of shares as part of a divorce settlement. Well, clearly there's still some value to these shares if his wife is happy enough to pick up that chunk from him. And very unfortunate that this didn't work out for Ben and his wife, but ouch. Also just highlighting that unfortunately, it seems like men take on most of the risk in any of these commitments going forward, which is too bad. It de-incentivizes men to want to get married and, make honest women and honest men out of themselves. But with that, from Boris Jordan, today we had a successful AGM during which Curaleaf obtained shareholder approval for all motions, bringing us one step closer to the TSX listing process. And so I just wanted to share this as it highlights Curaleaf getting one step closer to uplisting on the TSX, as that was one of the bigger news stories shared last week. A bit more information down here if you wanted to pause to read on the debate between the CBOE versus TSX uplisting. I'll just admit I didn't look into this much, so I don't have much to add, but thank you to Jays for sharing that. Well, we've got this from Verano, as they've received conditional approval to list on the CBOE in Canada. And so more information on why Verano might be doing this if you're interested. But it's interesting, as we've seen TerraSend and Curaleaf go the TSX route. Verano is going this route. It's like, okay, why? I don't necessarily know their reasoning, but upon listing the shares on CBOE Canada, the company plans to delist the shares from the CSE. Well, I guess this is how I'll find out why they're doing it. The transition does not require the company to recapitalize or undertake any corporate restructuring. So that is why they go to the CBOE versus the TSX, which forced Curaleaf to raise $16 million worth of shares, which is like 0.03, like a tiny percentage, less than 2% raise. So it's not a lot, but that's a requirement to get on the TSX, whereas it's not to get on the CBOE, hence maybe why Verano is going this route. The shares will continue trading in Canada on the CBOE under the same Verano in the US and on the OTCQX under the same symbol VRONF. Trading of the company's securities is not expected to be disrupted in any ways, and current shareholders do not need to take any action. And so more information here if you wanted to pause to read to learn more about this. Otherwise, full link is in the description. Well, we've got this one from Business Wire as Cresco Labs expands Sunnyside in central PA. So good to see them expand early there, as no doubt they found a great location, according to them, right off a major highway in a primary shopping area, and they look forward to serving patients and caregivers with their medical cannabis needs. Usually they do provide which number of dispensary this is. For Cresco, I'm not sure if it's in the 60th or the 70th. I know that they've been opening a lot in Florida, but it seems like they're trying to diversify and get more open in Pennsylvania. Well, it's still early and cheap to do so probably for them before they flip for adult use as well. And then so with that, from Trulieve IR, this is a Trulieve interview with, of course, CEO Kim Rivers and FoxBiz to discuss safer banking. And so not going to play this, but if you're interested, this link will be in the comments if you wanted to go through that. I am a shareholder of Trulieve, but it seems like it was a good interview. And as people responded pretty well to it. And then with that, from March 2 millions of interest from Jesse Redmond's key notes with Jason G. Wild, New Jersey MSOS can acquire a 35% interest in 7 additional dispensaries in the state and can look to participate in more than 35% of the revenues via franchise agreements going forward. This seems to be one little detail about New Jersey I wasn't aware of, so that's very promising. But for anyone interested either in TerraSend, whether you're a shareholder or not, or you're considering it, obviously a lot of potential for new markets that they are in, New Jersey one of them, but this link is from the morning keynote Bazinga Cannabis Capital Conference from YouTube. That link will be in the comments if you're interested to go through that. Well, lastly, just figured I would share, as TLRY Brands reports Q1 2024 financial results, and while they were pretty much less than impressive, just 177 million up from 150-something million Canadian, and this comes after they bought most of their competition and a lot of other beer companies to diversify because Canada just isn't growing as quickly because we don't have the people. So all that to say, I still own TLRY because of their exposure on major U.S. exchanges and because of, the future German play. And they continue to do what they need to become a leader in Canada. And so I don't own them because of their fundamentals or anything. I just explain the reasons, though. Again, this is not advice, just sharing why I still own them. But of course, if you wanted to go through them, full link in the comments for a deeper dive. But not necessarily worth it. And with that out-of-state news, these are the more than 50 dispensaries in New Jersey now selling cannabis. And so happy that New Jersey is not going through the same hell that New York is. They obviously didn't shoot themselves in the foot as badly, but just to recap that at this point, there's over 50 rec dispensaries and adult use weed now sold in 18 New Jersey counties. And so good to see them continuing to expand. And as they expand, they're seeing the benefits, hence leading to more expansion. But I think this actually lists all of them address-wise and everything. So if you wanted to go through that, you can grab the link in the comments. While from Benzinga Cannabis Conference, just wanted to share this story as New Jersey court sets precedent. Employer must reimburse worker for medical cannabis in workers' comp case. We love that because, of course, much like any other medicine, cannabis ought to be treated the same. And so more on this story here if you wanted to pause to read. Not going to spend too much time on it, but if you're interested, grab the link in the comments. While from Forbes, just relaying what we all know comes next month, but Ohio could be the 24th state to legalize adult use weed. And correct me if I'm wrong, but once you get to 25, does the Supreme Court then have to deem the current Schedule 1 and federal illegality unconstitutional when half of the states are not complying with the outdated federal law? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, please, but the good news is that 55% of those in Ohio did say that they definitely or probably will vote yes, while about 34% definitely or probably said they'll oppose it, and 11% were undecided or likely didn't have the courage to tell the truth. Mind you, this is only a representative of 834 voters. And so, hey, we're going to have to wait and see what November brings. This is unfortunately a high tax, which should hopefully also be lowered in time. So we're not going to see the success likely out of Ohio. Or we're not going to see as many sales going directly out of Ohio as we're seeing in Missouri or Maryland, unfortunately, just because so many of the sales is actually going to go to taxes. 10%, that's too high. But anyways, we'll see next month what happens in Ohio. Full link in the comments if you want to go through that. Well, just figured I'd share this from NewYorkUpstate.com as a crisis of credibility at New York's Office of Cannabis Management, a guest column. And so for anyone that's watched my videos, of course, you know that I harp on New York for being the worst possible cannabis experiment, an absolute shit show from incompetent Marxist regulators and politicians. Sadly, they've dug themselves a very big hole. They're buried deep, and now they've got to work their way up. But all that to say is this is a nice guest column op-ed about the shenanigans there and how we need to just get everyone fired, replace them with more competent individuals that, prefer the American ideals and provide equal access to opportunity as opposed to equal outcomes. And that is really the only way New York can turn that shitty situation around. And hopefully they can do it sooner than later. But with that, from Durango Herald, which highlights the obvious, our view, cannabis industry needs safer banking. Yeah, no shit. They needed it 2.5 years ago when the Dems promised that they would end prohibition in order to win that election. Clearly, we no longer can take people's words at face value. We need to look at their actions first before even considering whether their words hold any weight. But all that to say, you can pause, read if you're interested. But yeah, no shit. Obviously, we've learned a lot about politics over the last 2 years. Anyone that has watched my channel for that long, I appreciate you for sticking through with us. Obviously, we know the Safe Banking Act is needed, or the Safer Banking Act is needed. It is the new solution that has the best chance of passing now more than ever. But ultimately, hey, it's out of our hands, folks. So plan accordingly for your own situation. And place your bets based on what you believe might end up happening in the future. But again, this is not advice. And so with that, from Marijuana Moment, a few stories. Just 13% of top Capitol Hill staffers think cannabis banking bill will pass during current congressional session, survey finds. And so this is not very promising to hear after reiteration of how badly we need the Safe Banking Act. I know. I'm just sharing this, though. It's a survey from Marijuana Moment. Not from Marijuana Moment, but a Canvas Capitol Hill survey, which was conducted from September 5th to the 22nd. So this came before the markup actually even happened, though. So very old news, kind of misleading, to exclude that. But all that to point out, asked top legislative staff about 11 different issues that are pending this Congress and their perceptions about the likelihood that they'll advance. And then banking of the cannabis industry came in third from the bottom of the list, with just 13% saying it was likely to pass in the first half of the current 2-year Congress. Now, this did come after the August 30th news of the HHS. Now, keep in mind, this question is about safer banking. It's not about the rescheduling announcement. And so take from that what you will. But very interesting. Maybe I'll put this Punchbowl News article also in the comments below this one. But with that, Air Force granted triple the number of cannabis waivers it expected in first year of recruitment policy change. Love to see that, which means the Air Force can now recruit more competent individuals that potentially use cannabis in moderation and for the better. Now, it's possible that they could also be fooled into recruiting, lazy stoners that use cannabis not to their benefit, but doubtful, because their recruiting process is so strict and down pat. I imagine they're only going to get the most qualified cannabis users that will actually serve as better Air Force candidates. I could be wrong, but let me know what you think in the comments. And with that, from everyone, a moment, top cannabis advocacy groups consider merging amid fundraising challenges and leadership transitions. So let's have all the cannabis advocacy groups monopolize, because individually they can't seem to get much done. So maybe if they come together and put all their money in the same spot, we might, get safe passed and get the handcuffs off this industry. Who knows? Obviously, I think ending any federal overhang will help get rid of the outright discrimination that this industry has faced in the first place. That would be a big first step. But obviously, just ending prohibition outright is what I think anyone in the right mind knows what needs to happen at this point in time. And so with that, some spaces just to share before we head off. Toby Cannabis launching our weekly Higher Exchanges podcast and podcast today. I think this was their first ever chat. Jesse Redmond, Toby Cannabis, and Morgan Paxia. I don't like that Paxia name and want to stay far away from it. I'll be honest, I haven't listened to this one, but I imagine there is some good content in there. So if you wanted to listen to it, the link will be in the comments. But yeah, I haven't had the time and didn't make the time to listen to it. Honestly, I did listen to this one though at the end of work because I had a slow Friday and I was able to, and I'm glad I did because it's worth tuning in, especially because they touch on a lot of the speculation about whether moneymakers might actually also be playing the market as opposed to objectively just providing liquidity. Now, maybe that's the thing. Maybe we're naive and we didn't know that market makers also play both sides of the market. That's totally possible. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I understand all the intricacies of this. One thing I did want to point out that I thought was funny, that it does sound like at some point Noah, who is the CEO of AdvisorShares MSOS, of course, the company behind the ETF MSOS, does imply that like SEC and many government agencies are ethical and they follow the rules. It's like, okay, dude, come on. If you can believe that after everything we've seen over the last few years, you might not be the right person to be running an ETF fund. But also at the same time, maybe it is true that MSOS is helping drive the price down. But at the same time, it's just the sense that once the market sentiment changes and everyone is no longer short because there's some reason to believe that there's a reason to go long, I ultimately just think that whether the market makers are helping drive things down, because that's what the overall market sentiment wants, once that switches, it's just going to go in the other direction. And I do think that, yeah, there's probably a conflict of interest, or that's kind of shady for even MSOS to be able to play both sides like that. Because obviously you can make money going short, you can make money going long, but you almost just get the idea that MSOS is pro-cannabis and pro the idea that we should end cannabis prohibition, because when you add a legal dispensary in a place where there's no dispensaries, we see a 25% reduction in opioid overdoses, right? You think that this ETF fund wants to invest in cannabis because of the role that cannabis actually helps in saving lives and improving public safety, but that's not their goal, right? They're a corporation, so their goal is profit. We have to always remember that. And so let this be a lesson. Again, I don't know the intricacies. I don't necessarily know who's right, who's wrong here, but all I do know is that at some point the flip is going to switch and it's going to go from short to long again. That's what I think is the most important takeaway. I could be wrong though. Let me know in the comments what you think to my feedback or my response to this, but I definitely recommend listening to this. MJ Stock Trader asked some really good questions. Noah has some answers for them. Again, I don't think his answers were great. I think Noah sounds like more of a snaky salesman after this than anything. And if anything, this is at least more reason as to why I invest directly in the companies and not in any ETFs. And so lastly, hope that wasn't rambling, but wanted to share this one from hompz. Now I'll click on it because also when I do click on it, I don't necessarily know where he got this from, but I'm sharing this line. The law will be officially introduced into the Bundestag on October 13th. And so we have at least next week to look forward to an update out of Germany. And I believe this might be the law that would remove cannabis from the narcotics list, pending, if it gets passed, January 1st, 2024, according to what Boris has said. And so, of course, I will update you next week if we get any news on this, but just to show you as well, when I click through this, and go through this story, which I just did previously before starting this video, there was nothing mentioned about an October 13th date. So thank you, hompz, for sharing this. But man, if you're watching this, if you can let me know in the comments where you got this from, I would just love to put it in the comments as well so people can check that out. But then lastly, from Mark Landers, the dominoes do continue to fall for all of us that are paying attention and know way more about cannabis and what is happening than 99% of the world. So hey, kudos to us. We are ahead of the track. But Barbados poised to make history as first Caribbean nation to legalize rec cannabis. I almost thought Jamaica was going to be doing this a while back. But as of October 2nd, happy to share that the island's government is expected to introduce a bill to legalize the drug in the coming weeks, and it is widely anticipated to pass by the end of the year. And so, like Germany, I will keep you updated, folks. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you next week for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody. Till next time.